Val really loved my poetry. I was in kind of a daze in 2009. And I went to Marana, where he was, holding a meeting, and I asked him if I could read my poems. And he said, well, I think about it. And shortly thereafter, he said, okay, read them. And then I found myself in this program where the 5 prayers of the 5 major religions were read, and then it was me. In other words, I found myself part of the program. And usually I was always an afterthought. So, and I didn't introduce the poems like I'm discussing them now. I just got up there and read them. So people thought maybe Bao had written them. But when I first saw him, it was like, I felt like the prodigal son. And he took my hand and said, you're a good man, Michael. And there was just, we had a connection from the very beginning. So every time he spoke, formally or informally, he'd ask me to read a poem. And these were 26 poems that I wrote in a 2-week period. At the time, Mara was she was either dead or dying at the time, in May 1989. And I've been tweaking them ever since. So this is, and I called it an alphabet of ghazals because there are 26 of them, and I didn't want to number them. And I didn't want to burden them with titles. But this is Ghazal Q. It's been over 50 years since that first encounter when you tore the bandage from my eyes, blinding me with your brilliance, reducing me to ashes, leaving me despairing to see your face again. For 10 years, I felt the pain smoldering deep within my breast like magma waiting for release. Anger surged upon me like squalls at sea. Fury uncontained by guilt whipped emotions into mighty waves that threatened others and humiliated me. The fiercest hurricanes and I became kindred souls, dashing ourselves upon the shore, upon your breast. And still I turned and yearned and burned for you until life and death were nothing more than copper coins thrown upon the ground. Lord, what have you done to me? I had little dreams of peace, respectability, happiness, and marriage, a place to call my own, but not this. Not this devastation, this ravaging of the soul. Nothing prepared me for the agony that consumes me day and night. Your love has laid me bare and naked to the core. Ghazal P. Often I see my past lives and weep. There is no glory in them, no pride, no famous names over which to boast or gloat or boast, if I could say it right. Just mountains of arms and legs and heads from battles I have fought, women raped and screaming, children stabbed and bleeding, outraged at the injustice of it all, that by my hand I had commanded, or by the sword I had wielded. I am bathed in blood. There is no redemption for my deeds. I caused the death of millions of souls and 6,000 men crucified on the Appian Way for something I never forgave myself. I raised a slave revolt because of anger, and thousands died because of it. It was a lie when I said, I'll take you to the promised land. Just a lie to make you angry, and a lie to give you hope. A lie to cover my own wish to die. Better to die as freemen than live as slaves, I argued, and resolved to lie about our bleak prospects and lie about ships to carry us to freedom. I ask you, Lord, and all those involved, to forgive me this awful abuse of trust which haunts me day and night. You've always been forgiven, you reply, and now forgive yourself. What happened is all past. Those people followed you because they loved you. You gave them hope and a sense of their own power that slaves united could defeat the greatest of armies. Trust yourself to raise another army, one that wages war on greed, war and selfishness. If you fight as well as you did many years ago, you will succeed. There is no promised land except in your hearts and in the stillness of your minds. I will always be there to guide you. And if you should make mistakes, don't worry. I will always love you. I always break down when I read my poetry. Well, let me read you something that's more cheerful. How's that?
I see why Baoji liked them, the raw feeling that you're expressing, because his were also very raw.
Could you turn up your volume a little bit so I can hear you better?
Oh, well, I'll just speak louder.
Okay.
I see what I think I see why Baoji liked them so much, because you have such strong feeling, very raw feeling expressed in there.
Well, he taught me how to write ghazals in '74, and I lost his instructions. And I just remembered the last instruction that he gave me was, it was the lover complaining to the beloved. So, and I always like the format of Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote very personally to God, rather than a formal ghazal structure. Anyway, the last poem I'll read. My clock has numbers and no hands. No longer is it about 10 o'clock. It is exactly 10:10. Does this really matter? At this very moment, time is slow. In 1/2 hour, there'll be a split-second race to be on time to something soon forgotten. Lord, when I contemplate your you-ness, how else can I describe the indescribable? Time is non-existent. It is a leisurely evening spent absorbing the smells of trees and grass and flowers, awestruck by the sunset, laughing at children playing, lost in conversations that lovers had who never seemed to say enough to satisfy each other. The picture fades and crumbles. Hurry, Michael, you'll be late. And swept up by time's torrent, disappears in guilt for wasting precious seconds that could have been more useful. Lord, is it time to leave? Or is it time to stay? Someday, when it pleases you, may I stay forever. So that's some of what I do. Now that I'm happily married, I don't write much poetry. It seems like in the absence, the yearning, I write, you know? So I'll tell you about my woodworking career. First, I'm going to read a quote by Baba. My manifestation will embrace the economic, social, and religious aspects of life. It will spiritualize all human activities in art, science, music, politics, and drama. In the near future, a great universal drama will be enacted, the theme of which will be pure love, selfless service. I will play the leading part in the world awakening drama. Dear Baba, I love that. I will play the leading part.
A good one, yeah.
What?
I like that one, the world awakening drama. It is quite a drama.
And I will play the leading part. Now, if anybody else but him said that, he's an egotist. And he is the only one qualified to say that. This image here, this wood carving, is something that I didn't know I could do. I went to India in '74. And Padre and I became friends, and we were talking, and he found out I was a wood carver and a woodworker. And he said, why don't you do panels for the doors of the tomb? Because I was telling him how I liked the doors of the churches in Europe that had all the lives of the saints, or the 12 stations of the cross. And there would be something to look at while you waited to, go into the church or cathedral. So I said, well, carve some panels. So I did one panel, and well, I got back to the Myrtle Beach where I was living, and I was stumped because I did some drawing. I knew how to draw, but I didn't think I could do this. It was so amazing when my figures turned out to be so lifelike, and Baba just came out of the wood like that. Now, this is the result of about 200 hours of carving. And this was a split in the wood, and I broke it apart and re-glued it. So in this picture, that therefore is very old, but I finished carving it in '76. And I showed it to Jarl, who wanted to keep it, but I wanted to clean it up and trim the edges first. So I have it on my wall. I like having Baba in my house. I have two paintings of Lynn, and he and I became very good friends as well. Do you guys remember the conversations, the teas that Lynn would have Sundays, I believe, at his house? Oh, they were great. We had a great time.
Mhm.
Well, my artist statement says, oh, do you want to read this, Mary?
Sure, if you want me to.
Well, I'd like to hear somebody read about, say something about me.
Okay. This is Michael's artist statement. Natural beauty fills me with awe. Patterns of wood with their constantly changing shapes and textures inspire reverence. Instead of trying to force wood to produce a design, I flow with it to enhance it. Handmade furniture in one's environment adds a qualitative shift in one's life, which has to be experienced to be appreciated. It always catches the eye, always invites to be touched. My father, an internationally known artist, taught me how to draw. Most importantly, he taught me how to see the world as an artist. My mother was an aspiring classical pianist who moved her baby Steinway wherever we moved.
Mhm.
I'd sit under it as she played, absorbed and immersed in Chopin and Beethoven. At the age of 5, I took up building balsa wood airplanes, which led to boats and cars and a love of design. At 18, I started working on real boats. At 30, in 1971, I bought my first power tools and began making furniture. Within a year, I went professional, building and repairing furniture, antiques, boats, windows, doors, trim, interiors, even pews for local churches. I enjoy bringing my clients' dreams to life. After a profound mystical experience, I began the search for the one among the many, the essence that all life has in common. I wrote and self-published a book of poetry and another unpublished, as well as 3 screenplays. I became an accomplished guitarist, teacher, and songwriter. I studied musical composition and learned how to compose and arrange music. I've organized and directed 2 small choruses. The first chorus performed regularly at the Meher Baba Spiritual Center. My mother's love of literature and music rubbed off on me. My father's brilliance had a profound influence in my life. Having God as a living presence in my life has taught me about love and a life of service to others. I live to bring beauty into the world. Written by Michael Childs on July 5th, 2021.
It was amazing to hear that. So, and I'm thinking of sitting here saying, it's all true. Like Bao is sitting in the audience with this big grin on his face. So I moved to Myrtle Beach in '71. And just before then, I was in Pasadena area, and I had purchased a radial arm saw and a couple of tools, and I helped build the furniture and fixtures for the Pasadena bookstore with John Page. And then my daughter was born in 70, yeah, about that time. I built her a cradle that she outgrew in 2 weeks. And then I built a coffee table. So this, what you're looking at, is my third piece of furniture, in a way. Jane had commissioned something similar with a plexiglass top and a paper barrel. You've seen them, like a 33-gallon barrel. And she placed it on top and had Baba's brochures and some clothing of his. I don't remember what she had on display at the 1964 World's Fair. And she wanted something nice in wood that would go into Baba's house. So I sat down and designed this for her. And it had some really interesting details to it. As you can see, there's no molding around the glass. It's all held in there with slots. It took a lot of careful planning and tool handling. And these pieces on top, I don't know if you can see, but can you see my fingers at all?
Mm-mm.
No. Anyway, the very pieces on top are screwed into these uprights, and they actually hold the whole thing up. It's a cantilever structure, and the base is made out of 20 pieces of walnut that were trimmed to 8 degrees exactly. Anyway, I did the drawing before I made it, and I showed it to Elizabeth, who had to give it her seal of approval. She put it on, she looked at it for 30 seconds. And it was so amazing. She just spent 30 seconds and she stared out in space like this for the longest time. It felt like at least 2 minutes, in which, when you're waiting is a long time. And then she turned to me and said, "That's quite a meditation, isn't it?" And asked me how much I wanted for it. And I told her $600. And she wrote out a check, and it's still there. It's a little bit the worse for wear, but it's still together. And I guess somewhere in between there, I did something for Phyllis. I know I did something for, what's his name? Herman Lowe. I think I did maybe 4 software boxes. And a lot of repairs. I opened up a shop. And Frank McNutt was my partner for a while until we broke up the partnership, and then I went into Myrtle Beach proper. And I worked by myself and did some interesting projects. This was one for the Episcopalian Chapel in North Myrtle Beach. This was for the church itself. And it was very difficult to make because the sides and not the sides, but the back and the seat were curved. And it's very difficult to cut curves in wood. You can cut straight lines and you can round things over, but to cut concavities is difficult. This is a carving. I started my carving career there. And this is a table for Jane Haynes. There was a similar table in the barn that Elizabeth had collected. I don't know if you know it, but Elizabeth loved to collect fine furniture. She even had some pieces in there in Baba's house that were made in the 13th century. So this was for Jane. I don't know if it's still around or not, because there was a fire and it may have been destroyed in the fire. And she said Baba's favorite flower was the gardenia. So she had me carve gardenias in the corners, or I volunteered, one or the other. Now, a fellow came to me with a 2-inch square photo of something he had photographed in Mexico. It was a picture of a face, smiling face with sun rays around it. And I made a 3-foot square interpretation of it. And it looks a lot like Baba. It was quite a big project. There was a lot of wood removed. This is maybe almost 2 inches thick and 3 feet, weighed at least 60, 80 pounds. A lot of good detail on it. And there was a couple that hired me. I was their go-to carpenter, woodworker, and they were collecting my pieces. And this is wormy chestnut. And you see, it's hard to see, but these are 2 roses in the middle, surrounded by daisies. And they wanted that at the foot of their bed to hold their linens. And this is a coffee table that they ordered, ebony and chestnut, wormy chestnut. The reason why there was wormy was because there was a blight that killed the chestnut trees. And then they were invaded by worms. So, and this is something I made out of a first growth yellow pine that came out of houses that were built and knocked down in Charleston, South Carolina. So you can't see it very well, but you see those little black specks? Those are all nails that I had to saw through because they used iron nails to put them together. It was covered with epoxy. Now this is one of my last projects in Myrtle Beach. What you're looking at, I wish I could point to it. Oh yeah, I can do this. Here we go. This is, these are all doors. And I did that on purpose because I wanted people to think it was a solid plane. And note also, still they are, there's 2 legs. It was over 11 feet long, but notice how straight this is. Well, building model airplanes, I knew how to build structures with very light framing. And these legs go all the way up to the top, hold this steady. All this teak is glued on top. And I made the back, the support for the unit. So the face just hangs there. So then if you go to the next one, you see what's inside. There's a shelf, I think. And this is painted. And the teak was glued on the outside of it. And it was commissioned by the fellow that owned the land that the Myrtle Beach Hilton was on. And it included sofa and a wet bar and a copper tin for plants and a 9.5-foot teak door, which took 2 men to hold that for me to hang it. I was up on a ladder with my chisels, banging away at the wood to make what they call mortises, or places to hold the hinges. And this was a commission from the First Baptist Church in Conway. They wanted to have lights. They wanted an illuminated cross. And they designed the outside, but gave me no instructions about construction or anything. And I knew that this part here was where this would correspond to Christ's chest. And he's hanging, and it's hung by these points here where these nails were. And that is the weight of his body would want to come down and break the joint. So I wanted to make it strong enough to stand there for as long as that church stood. And I filled it with, not filled it, but I covered the inside with aluminum foil and fluorescent lights. And at the same, just a few months before, my ex-wife took off with the children to the West Coast to become a Sufi. And I was devastated. And I didn't realize how much I love them until they were gone. I mean, love is so natural that you don't think about it. Just love. You only, you're only aware of it when it's gone. Or in the case of Baba, where he's not there, and you want his embrace, you want his presence, you want the pat on the head or the scowl, anything but nothing. And so I felt I was building my own cross, that this was my own crucifixion. And shortly thereafter, I left Myrtle Beach and went to the West Coast to be with my kids. So a lot of spiritual adventures in Myrtle Beach. So this was my first project when I got to, we moved to Oakland because it was cheaper than Berkeley. And woodworkers are not known for making a lot of money. So the funny thing about this, it looks very nice, right? Well, it was a water heater. Yeah, it looked ugly as hell. And he was preparing the house to sell. So I just designed this whole unit here, had these doors made, covered it all up, put the little bookshelf in there, refinished the floor. He had me do a herringbone design on the walls. And he had me working for months at $6 an hour. 1975, and I asked him for a raise to $8 an hour, and he fired me. It's typical, okay, what can I say? And then at one point, a fellow asked me to build a shed for him. So I designed this shed on this hillside. And was doing some nice work on it. I never finished it. He replaced me with somebody else. But I built these two doors. And instead of doing the usual thing with headers and jams and extra wood, I just cut the hinges right into the supports. It's so funny, I have these skills in woodworking that I don't even think about. And very few carpenters would ever attempt this because there's always a danger that it's going to be in the wrong space. But I became a master woodworker because I made so many mistakes. And I had to cover them up. So you either make two mistakes in a row to make it look like it's intentional, or you just learn to cover them up or make them unobtrusive. And I learned that making that display case for Baba's house, because if you notice, I probably didn't, but the top of the case, or not really the top, but the base of it that spread out was thin. And it was thin because I kept on sanding it down to get it absolutely flat. And I couldn't do that because the machine wasn't adjusted right. So in my attempt to get it flat, I sanded 1/4 of an inch off it and exposed the dowels that held it together. And here, a maple dowel and a walnut top is like a disaster. And there was nothing I could do about it. Except I called up Jane and I told her what happened, and she was so sweet. And she says in her inimitable way, "Don't worry about it, my dear. We'll just put Baba's sandals over them and nobody will ever know." I don't know whether he's done that for me for the rest of my life, because sometimes you don't even know the mistakes that you've made. But I decided at that point that I was going to leave perfection to God, and that it was okay to make mistakes and live with them. And just, you can't be afraid of failure. And I never made this kind of door before. I never made a shed before. I was just diving in there, doing it because I wanted to do it. And I had high standards, like if you see these joints here, how nice, how neat they are. There's no gaps in them. And here the gap is just big enough to hold this piece of rubber, which is the insulation, so no cold air would come in. And the doors are perfectly hung so that this is perfectly parallel. And that is not easy to do, not at all, but it just came naturally to me. And here's a fellow that wanted skins, but he wanted his door reskinned and overlay, he called it. So my partner and I did the ceiling and the walls and the hallway. And here a lady wanted her deck done. And not that I built a lot of decks in my life, but I would research it. And I would just create these minor masterpieces. And the same woman wanted this big glass window. And the trick with this window was that it was so big that we used tempered glass. A piece of glass at the time cost $250. It's tempered. And I don't know if you know what tempered is, if they heat up the glass. So it has a melting point of 900 degrees. And you can hit it with a hammer and it won't break. And that's perfect for safety reasons. This was somebody came to me with a hobby shop that they were building. And I had some general plans. And I designed these cabinets, fixtures for them. All these shelves here. These braces, which I invented at the time, now I see them for sale. And of course, they all had to be lined up exactly right for them to be flush. And I became partners with 5 or maybe 4 other woodworkers. So there was a group effort and they all jumped in there and did some really good quality work. This is a salad bar for a restaurant shaped like a boat. And that was closest I ever got to building a boat, about half of one. And there was a lot of trick stuff involved because it's really hard to build surfaces that are curved like that, where it looks like the edges are straight. And you notice these planks, interesting how this cursor does not want to show. What is it? Oh, there we go. See how that looks straight to the eye? It's actually curved. And so boat builders know how to do these things. And I've had boat building ambitions. I've yet to build my first boat, but I'm planning to do that next year. This was a lawyer who wanted a Roman tub because he had a bad back. So I built this out of epoxy fiberglass and Spanish tiles. And it turned out pretty well. And my partner was good with the plumbing. And this was all open space. We had to put in the floor and the walls. So it was a nice job. He was happy with it. This was a kitchen for the San Francisco Design Center, $50,000 Italian kitchen. And let me tell you, it wasn't worth $50,000. The same basic construction as my IKEA kitchen. But all that woodworking in the background, now that's, you know, hanging the plywood, hanging the lights. This was a piece of reflective wood we called flaming birch. And of course, everything has to be aligned right. Because if the floors aren't flat, and they weren't, they were an inch and a half off. So imagine you start off with 3 inches here for the base, like so, right? Then you end up with extending it like this just to get the floor level. And then everything has to be plumb next to it. And without that, you just have garbage. And here a boat builder shows me open spaces. He showed me this. And this is just raw plywood. How much to build these windows? I said, I don't know, $1,500. Well, it should have been 15,000. 3 months later, it was like 238 lineal feet of molding inside and out. See, this is the inside. And you can see here the molding here and the molding here. And there's the same challenge that these pieces of wood had to be cut from 6-inch planks and they had to be cut into a 1/4-inch thickness so I could wrap them around. But in wrapping them around, they had to have a fair curve like this. And then you had to be able to take the glass out, and the boat builder used 1/2-inch tempered glass because I was dealing with the fact that this boat was going to go out into the waters off the Columbia River, which are they're notorious. Boats go down all the time. And the one thing I didn't want to be said about my work is that a big wave knocked the windows out and flooded the wheelhouse and killed it, because a good wave would just knock out all the instruments and the steering and the electrical. And I did not want that on my head. So I built it like a brick shit house. Don't mind my language, it's kind of the workman in me. I'm an intellectual blue collar worker, which is quite a combination. Got me into a lot of trouble because I'm not in one world or the next. But anyway, the master shipwright wasn't the boat builder, the guy who hired everybody. He was like the contractor. He had a Bahamian called Pele, short, good-natured man. And he came up to the wheelhouse, which was at least 20 or 30 feet above the ground. I mean, this was a big boat. My house is maybe 38, 40 feet long. This is double the size of the house that I live in. And 20 feet high, and you have the whole section of the boat that's in the water, which is another 6 feet at least. So he climbed up on the ladder and said, "Michael, you did a good job." And I said, "Look," I pointed, "see, I've got a gap here of 1/16 of an inch." I mean, I used over 1,500 screws screwing this thing together and glue. And we were sanding it the night before it was launched. We worked all night to get it finished. And he touched me and grabbed me by the arm. Not me grab me, but he just held me by the arm and said, "Michael, you did a beautiful job." Now, if you know men do not give each other compliments. Like women say, "Oh, what a lovely dress you wear." You know, if I say that to a woman, she thinks I'm coming on to her. But a woman says it to another woman, it's taken as a compliment. And so when a guy tells you something like that, you know, instead of saying, it's not half bad, that's what I expected. So I realized when he said that to me that I had earned my journeyman's papers, maybe even my master's certificate. And it was all informal, never led to any more work in a way, because I took too long to do my stuff. So this was another boat job. This joint right here, very tricky to do because there's a bevel going this way. You know what a bevel is, right? An angle. And then it's a curve. So it's a compound beveled curve that has to meet perfectly. And here too. And this has got to be flat. They don't make curved windows. Just all these challenges and problems that you have to solve. You wanted the decks covered. So I took an old boat and we made it new again. And this is a boat I owned for 4 years. And the 2 sons lived on it with me for a while. My youngest son all the time, but my oldest son decided to live near his school. Built this part was new. These planks were rebuilt. I love the shape of this boat, but I couldn't afford it. I was either going to have a life or a boat. And when I met a woman that I fell in love with, I decided to opt for a life. And so I sold the boat. And this is some more boat work. Again, the highlight is its curves and how neatly this is done. And you stick your finger in that hole, there's a little latch. And that's how you open it. And this was, he had a stove at the top, and he wanted a nice surround for it, frame. These are here because when you put these fiddles up to keep things from flying off the shelf when you're rolling around in the water, there has to be a way to get your washcloth or your sponge and clean up the stuff. You ever try to get dirt, stuff off the walls or something? Can't. So that's called a clean out. So anyway, so there's an art to it. This was for a houseboat, $500,000 houseboat at the time. And they wanted a sleeping alcove. So this was the framing for it. And this was supposed to be drawers. Never got that far because like other customers, they didn't want to pay me. But this was, and after a while, I just can't work for nothing. So this is all these curved pieces. That's the art. When you see that in boat building, you know that it's been put together by craftsmen. And a lot of modern boats don't have these curves anymore because they're just too much trouble to build. So you can just see that you have this little alcove, you step over it, the mattress goes here, and this is the closet on either side. Took weeks to do that. Now, this is the way of introducing the car. I forget his name, Fernand. Beautiful car, right? This is what he wanted me to do. All this woodworking in here. He had the strips that I could use, but I had to glue this Carpathian burl, which is only found in the Carpathian Mountains. And it's common to Jaguars and expensive cars at the time. But this was already there and I didn't do this part. These were a travel case for personal style counselors. I don't know if you remember it, but remember when people were there was spring, winter, summer, and there were different fabrics, different colors that you'd wear for,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
well, these guys wanted me for a lot of money to build traveling cases with them. So these were filled with swatches, which are held down with pieces of thin plywood with wing nuts. And they were going to take them to airports, so they had to be portable. So I designed this, made all this. The legs fit inside this part. And there's then another shelf goes in there. This goes underneath the shelf. Then they fit into two boxes made out with plywood and fiberglass with little wheels on the bottom so they could wheel them through the airport. And they had to be tight so they wouldn't rub against each other. More fancy jobs. And this was a beautiful oak table. And the couple could not seat their family around it, all 20 of them. So I measured it out. And I knew it had to be at least 20 feet, at least about 10 feet long to fit 20 people. So then I built them these leaves. And you notice how these edges match up? I had to design and have built a special router bit from, it cost $361 for this router bit that was maybe this big, 4 inches high. And when that thing turned around, just really, I managed with my fingers all being mangled. So probably the only reason I managed to keep all my fingers because I worried about them so much. But it didn't stop me from woodworking, which is an interesting thought, right? Oh my,
You wanted me to
Oh,
remind you, Michael?
my
We're
wife just came out. We're getting on the last 15 minutes.
Yep,
All right, thanks. Anyway, so four what do you call it? Leaves. And that's what it looked like from the end view. Let's see. And this, when I turn this on the lathe, you can see it fits underneath the extensions because it was sagging. And I knew that they probably need a 30 or 40 pound turkey to feed everybody. I didn't want to put the turkey on the table and the whole thing would just break. So this the doctor, this is not the doctor, this is the secretary. She wanted this type of design, and this is plastic laminate, and the tricky part was bending it, making it that, I did a lot of, this is sort of a mundane thing to work with, but it took a certain amount of skill. And this is another leaf job, but look at the beauty of the wood. Isn't that extraordinary? When you cut oak a certain way, you get these rays. It's just beautiful. And this is an oak desk that's for sale, by the way. Anyway, that's a commission. And then we're getting into my own furniture. This is a stool that I designed. I carve out the inside like this, which is quite a trick. And most people don't know how to do that. It took me actually years to learn how to do it well, but these are some of the tools that I use. And I do a lot of advertising with them. This one won third prize at the California State Fair. And this is their African mahogany cousins. This one won first prize at 2008 California State Fair. And it's an innovative leg design. I wanted to build something that was small that I could take around to show people. And I wanted to do something that had never been done before. And a table like this that doesn't have pieces going across like this to hold the legs, that was novel. And to have it cantilevered so that it started here and ended up at the other corner, that hadn't been done before either. So I call them walking tables. That's another variation of it. This one, yeah, this one won first prize at the Orange County Fair 2014. This is a fun table that I built from the flame birch. These change color as you move. And this, I didn't know what to do with it, the scrap that I had left over. This is what I call a travel table, because it all comes apart. And so the supports for the legs, instead of being underneath the table, or underneath the edge, top edge, are here on the floor. So I guess that's innovative. And these are the wedges that hold it together. Beautiful wood. And I matched the wood to this grain because it was so beautiful. And this is curly maple. Took a lot of precision. And this table won first prize at the 2019 California State Fair. That's Purple Heart. And literally was purple when it was first cut. And this is what is known as Paduke, which is red. And it turns into a red brown. It actually turns into this color. Maybe a little bit more saturated, but when it has a bright light, it just explodes with light. And it moves, the grain moves as you approach it. So the whole table looks like it's moving. And of course, it's just standing still. And I like this, it has a certain sense of humor about it that I like. This one, oh, just sold. It's a lightly figured spalted maple, which is a fungal attack of fungus. And there was some dry rot in there. In other words, it was a piece of garbage wood that I resurrected with epoxy and gave it this life with these legs. So, and that's what the legs look like from the edge. So no matter how you look at this table, it's always changing. And look at the beautiful grain of this wood. It's called sapelli. Sapelli. It's a tiger bench. And the actual grain looked a lot better, but that's the only shot I had of it. This is again the walking table design. This is Paduke. And this is what it looks like from the top. And it looks like it's walking. I love it. I sold this out of a parking lot going up north to do a show. My son was talking to a lady as I came back from the bathroom, or maybe with coffee, and she said, "I want it." And this was a box from memories. This gentleman that wanted it was retiring, and he wanted to put important papers in it. And I had some of this cut out with a laser controlled, not a laser controlled, a computer controlled router. He selected the wood, and the joinery is dovetails. Very nice box. And that's it for my life of crime with woodworking. So do we have any more time?
We do. If anyone would like to ask questions or make some points or.
Yeah, Michael, I was wondering about when you wrote all those poems around the time of May in '89 when Mara died and was dying. Oh, what you did meet Mara at the Darshan.
Yes, and I met her again in '74 when she was talking to men.
Right, right. What was your reaction to meeting her?
Well, I was amazed. She talked about the new life, which was 1949, and she remembered what Baba wore and what he ate.
Wow.
And the way, and she would look out, I was there, but she was talking to her memories, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And the funny thing, I have this internal conversation going on with Baba all the time, and never with Mara necessarily, more than I'm aware of. But after Baba and I connected, and he became my mentor, actually. I was volunteering at Mehrana, and I wanted to lie on the bed that he lay on for just to see if I could get any vibes or whatever. I just wanted to lie down on the same bed that he had used. So when I entered the room, there was a picture of Baba to my right, and right underneath it was a picture of Mira. And then I always greet them like, "Hi guys." And I'm not too pious because I've known him for so many years. So I lie down on the bed, and for the previous 7 months, I'd had this tortured love affair with this woman. And she was just using me, but I'd had this bolt of lightning go through me in connection with her, and it inspired true love, but on her it was like wasted. So I was suffering over it. And I'm lying in the bed, and what I'm thinking is, please excuse the language, but fuck you, bitch, for taking advantage of me. For using me. And I heard Baba say to me, "Write it down." I said, "Write it down? You never talk to your women like that." He says, "I never had women like that around me, but you have got to stop her. You have got to speak up." And for about a month previously, I've been trying to end this, using her as a muse. I mean, every time I thought about her, I found something else to write about. And I was trying to kill it with this poem, and I had written already 3 endings, and none of them were ended. So I came up with that FU, Baba's encouragement. So when I got back to the city, I ended the poem. But before I left the room rather, I passed the wall with the pictures, and I heard Mara say to me, for the first time, Mara say to me, "How would you like to have a woman like me in your life?" I said, "Yeah, I knew what the answer was when I said it after a second. Yes, just as long as she doesn't treat me like a perfect master. I couldn't handle that one. So, I mean, I wouldn't want somebody collecting my fingernails and worshiping me like she did, because I'm definitely not worthy of worship. So I finally end the poem. And funny thing is, the lady was in the poetry reading, and we all had a chance to spend 2 minutes reading our work. And I read that, the last couple of verses with that phrase in it. And instead of being quiet and pretending that we didn't know each other, that was our agreement, she just jumped up as if an electric bolt went through her and started complaining about me
Oh,
to a friend, to a mutual friend. Of course, he no longer befriended me, and I guess he was another one of her victims, and he was sworn to same secrecy. But I knew I got to her, and I was free of her. And that was the end of the poem. And the funny thing is, at Mara's birthday, 2010, which was actually the following year, 2009, my son David and I were going cross country, and we stopped at LA, because that's the, you have to go to LA to go across the country. And Debbie Ash said to Donna Lee, why don't you put these guys up for the night on their way over? Well, we started talking, she and I. David went to sleep, her son was asleep, the dog didn't bark when I came in, liked me right away, which was a good sign. If he barked at me, I felt like we would have fallen in love or had a chance. Anyway, we started talking to each other and talked to each other as I drove cross country with David in about 4 days. And coincidentally, her ex-husband had given her tickets to go to the center. And so we met up there. Oh, I forgot to tell you that that's where we were going. So we met her at the airport, and she and I conducted this platonic classic courtship. And I'd walk her to her cabin that night. I gave her maybe a chaste kiss, and we'd cook together and walk together and just spend every moment together. And by the end of those 10 days, we were really in love. And Mary's words came to mind. How would you like to have a woman like me in your life? So it's amazing what happens when you write poetry. And you don't discover all these things about yourself that you never knew before. So, any other questions? Oh yeah, we're still together. It's 11 years now. So.
I was amazed at, trying to price what you did and everything put into it. I mean, it just must have been so hard. I don't know. Those things are so beautiful, and yeah, that came strongly to me. Like, wow, that must have been suffering to try to interface in the world with what you're doing, what you're trying to do it as perfectly as you can. It's just amazing. Whoa.
Well, I had the point of view, which I still practice, that what I was working for the Avatar.
Oh yeah.
So it was never good enough, and it always had flaws. But I knew that if my heart was in the right place, he'd forgive me. And one of the things I really enjoy with Donna is cooking and serving. I mean, and then she has something to tell me, and she'll sometimes whistle. So she, like just now, she came out giving me a 15-minute warning. And she's always keeping an eye on me, like Mara. She's always looking at me saying, your hair needs a trimming, or, oh, and there's a blackhead to squeeze, or maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that one, please. But always, it's just this care and attention that I just always feel like Baba is in my life, taking care of me. And shortly after I came to Baba, I regretted not knowing him in person, in the flesh, because I assumed that I would never have his embrace. But I have it all the time now, much more so than I would if he were in the body. And it's not less than, it's not that I love her more than, or I say I love Baba more. It's just love. And there's no measuring it, and there's no comparing it. And why not love your children as well as you love God? And I know that that's what he wants from us, to love each other that well. I mean, how else could we forge a new humanity, a brotherhood of man?
Yeah.
Yes, we love each other. So it's 5:05.
It is. Would anyone else like to bring up a point? Add a thought?
Hi, Michael.
Hi,
I'm-
Diane.
I'm sorry I got in so late. A meeting went way over, but this was recorded, right? So I can
Yes.
look at it.
Mhm.
I saw the end of your woodwork, which is just stunning.
It looks good on screen.
But you know, I'm a fan of your poetry.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Michael. This was absolutely pretty remarkable.
Really?
Mhm. It was.
Well, I wouldn't know.
Well,
I live with myself.
now
all the
you
time, so I
know,
really-
now you know. I think I would think of your poetry as raw. That's the way it strikes me, is there is a great deal of power in that rawness. And then the fluidity comes through your woodworking. The grace. So that's my thought that I will offer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
And thank you. That was a lot of effort and energy on your part.
Well, now I have a lot of my work cataloged,
Oh, nice.
which I didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually go to a show or whatever and show people PowerPoint. So no, it was always very good. And if you want to do it again, well, I'm also an accomplished artist. I went professional for 8 years doing it. And there's more poems to be read.
Always, I'm sure.
No, I'm on fire. I was at Amerizad in 74. An army officer came up to our tea table and he says, "Will I find peace as Naya Baba?" And Arish looked at me because we had this connection and he said, "Tell him, Michael." And I said, "You want peace? I'm on fire." And that fire has not gone out.
How fortunate.
Well, I think I want to be burned to a crisp. So everybody that I'm in contact with. And if you're too careful about what you say to people, know that. I want you to trust yourselves and just be reckless. Pour your heart out to people. Because we're smothered with trite conversations and small talk. We don't talk about what what's in our hearts, what we should be talking about. We accept so little. It's like prisoners, you know, looking at God through the bars of a cage. He said, I want you to come into my cage so I can devour you. So that's, well, I'm 80 years old, so I maybe another, I figure I'm going to retire when I'm 96. So I've only got about 15 years. And I want to raise that army, inspire an army, not raise them, that's for me to be a general, but inspire people to be poets, speak from the hearts. Because when you speak from the heart, it turns out to be poetry. That's why Rumi and Hafiz always use poetry. There's something about the rhythm and the how the syllables fall that touch people, not just the content. So the spoken word is really powerful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Michael. I truly enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, it's good to talk to you again, Rosalie. And one of these days you'll have to tell me about that car ride, which you claim I
remember the car ride.
I do not remember it.
But why did you bring it up then?
Because it's there, it just came up, you know, I think of you. And I remember you dancing, I remember that. And I just loved you because you were such a character. You had this recklessness about you that I loved, all right?
Well, thank you, Michael. And thank you, Diana and Rosalie and Diane for coming
Yeah.
tonight.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see everybody in August. Have a wonderful evening.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Meher Baba.